In this part of the conversation, we advocate for the recognition and acceptance that not all things are simple. Human beings have the capability to reinvent or change the way things are, even established systems. A line from an existentialist perspective, human beings innately have responsibilities. Knowledge of this is privilege. It all boils down to the question, are you happy with the person you are becoming? To understand the world, we have to understand the connection of subjectivity and objectivity. And as we say throughout the podcast, the world and its human beings do not exist apart from each other, they exist in constant interaction.
Becomes in the discussion, paano ba? How can I put this? It 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 really boils down to recognition. We should have that uh, not only power but kind of bravery to accept that things are not as simple uh, as we thought them to be. Because again, we have that assumption that we're all supposed to be rational, or we're in a civil society, so people will be by default be civil. And that sometimes is the problem of people who internalize the system, not just the system uh, that comes with that comes in the social sphere or in the public sphere, but also the ones that we find in our books. We think that people will always act rationally, that people will fight for the good, and so on and so forth. And there are problems with that. Not so much about uh, not so much more on people not doing what they're supposed to do, but rather uh, more on what they believe in, and how important it is to question what they believe in. Because we don't question that as long as we're not affected. That's the problem that MJ raises all throughout the story that she said. That you have people that had to wait until they themselves are the ones affected. So what you have in the end are isolated cases that, if you just dig more deeply, will you reveal you the norm. The norm doesn't get into the picture because we have again that delusion that delusion that everything is working as they should. In fact, when you ask the police or important people, let's just put it at that, important people why they do what they do, not just the people who are good, but people who are also doing bad things in the name of the good, they think that are good.
Yeah,
That always goes back to their belief systems. They
they were
believe that what
in
they're
ang
doing
yeah,
is mm,
ang sasagutin lang
what they
naman nila
believe.
sa'yo, I just did my job,
Mm,
right? I did what I thought was right. And you know that might be true. Like I'm not in the business of judging other people for their actions, and I want to understand that different people have different reasons, and there is always nuance in decision making, right? But one thing that literature has taught me, in talking about and in looking at a person's character, especially in a short story, for example, is that it is important to always look at the action of that character and not anything else, right? Because the character might say, I was just doing this because it was wrong, or I thought this was right. Therefore, I should be absolved, diba? In defense. But you must always look at action as a critic reading into things. And action is always what we base on in terms of judgment,
mm,
right? And look, there are things that may be less worse than others, like I don't know, cheating on an exam might not be the worst thing that you can do, or plagiarizing a paper might not be the worst thing that you can do. But I would invite everybody listening to really think about it, right? And if liberation is a praxis, then being a good person is also praxis, right? So,
Mm.
mm,
I mean, yeah, you cheated on an exam, great. But do you always cheat on exams? Right? I forgive you for that first time, but are you doing it again? Okay, second time you did it. Okay, great. Sure, twice. But did you do it a third time? Did you do it a fourth time? Or because you got away all these times, are you now cheating other people of their pay? Are you now going into illegal situations because you want to get ahead of everybody else and cite survival as your reason? Like, for example, in today's context, like getting ahead of the line in terms of vaccinations because you have connections, or you argue that you have hypertension when you actually don't. And it's very easy to forge a medical, slip
Mm.
or whatever, right? And it comes down to, are you happy with the person that you're becoming? And is that person you're becoming a human being? So when
Mm.
they're in the balik ako sa academic integrity day kasi parang yun lang naman utak ko. Pero like in the discussion section of the academic integrity day, some of the students, asking, how do I know if I'm doing well? How do I know if I'm being, or if I have integrity? And I go, I don't know if you have integrity. You're the one who should say, I have integrity. Diba? And it's always a process of, are you becoming the person you want to be? Are you happy with the way you're turning out to be because of the decisions that you've made? So some of those decisions that you've made may not be the right decisions, but are you taking steps in making the right decisions moving forward? Right? So, because sa akin yun lang naman. Like, we're not perfect people. Like, I'm sure if you dug into my history, please don't. Like, you'll find things that you think are not right. And ako pa lang nagsasabi na sa'yo, di ba? Parang zero. Not perfect. Not an angel. Far from it. But I want to be, right? I want to be an angel. I want to be a good person. So, ayun lang. I mean, it is it is practice. It is hard work. And it is so full of contradictions because we're human beings. But are you becoming the right person that you think? Diba?
Oh, it goes with having more information. And if you look at these people that we
True.
are discussing in this podcast, Paolo Freire, and even those that are among his contemporaries, even people that are like him in the past, they always appeared in an age where information became a cheap commodity, and we are in that time as well. In fact, our context is a bit more extreme than what they experience, and with that amount of information in our hands, there comes more responsibilities. There comes more agencies, because these terms, agency, responsibility, independence, they all are weaved together by the fact that because we know more, we can do more. Or the old Spider-Man quote, more power comes with more responsibility. So that's the trade-off with knowing more and having access to information that can make you know more. And you know more, there comes the possibility of you doing more and changing the way things are. So uh, it becomes a question of what are you going to do about it, instead of just how things are. Because the second
Yeah.
question, how things are, is already answered for you by all these mediums. So now, you having realized all of that, there comes your responsibility. That's actually quite a privilege to have, to change the way things are. Because if you go back to the classics, a lot of that, a lot of people who want to change things refer to. Diba? You have things like Dead Poet Society, where you have Robin Williams. Robin Williams exclaimed, "Ideas can still change the world." We forget in their context the role of the students who are seated in that classroom, who are seated in that scene. Ideas, when discussed and discussed alone, will just end up as ideas. The only way for us to go beyond that is to uh, embody these ideas and turn them into something more. Just turn them into something real. That's the magic of being human beings. We can be the sculpture and the sculptor at the same time. We have the ability to change the way things are. And I think that's why, in general, even you are inclined to these colors because you are reminded of that agency, that power to change things. And as optimistic as it sounds, it also comes with responsibilities that we also have uh, to value. Not just say we're gonna do things because we're being oppressed. Rather, we're doing things because we want to change things, and we are the ones that can do such. So just to thread together MJ's thoughts about her experiences and the ones that she shared about her students.
It's very romantic, no?
Yes, ma'am. So basically, from that previous discussion, actually, we've already talked about sort of the discussion of Paolo Freire in terms of sub-oppression, in which the oppressor themselves sometimes commit action, diba? That is sort of helping the system because of how the fear of freedom, as he says, for both the oppressor and the oppressed occurs. And so I would just like to ask diba, na it's obvious that the manner of liberation and the process is difficult. It's obvious that it's hard. But why is it very challenging for us, especially like ma'am talked earlier on about contradictions and being human. So what does that contradiction play into the part of trying to find solutions?
But
Mm, sige, go Marco, ikaw muna.
ayun, in the context of really, and the people he's coming from. If you are familiar with John Paul Sartre and his version of existentialism, may parallelism kasi si John Paul Sartre and Paolo Freire in so much of the people's fear of, or human beings' fear of freedom. Because what you have with freedom and agency is uncertainty. When you are free, when there are no established values that you have to follow, things suddenly become uh, how do I put this? Become ambiguous. Also, to quote the title of Simone de Beauvoir, another person who is within these circles, her book entitled Ethics of Ambiguity. Um, diba? All these people, de Beauvoir, Sartre, Freire, they're saying that with freedom, you don't only have responsibility, you also have ambiguity, or you also have uncertainty into the form. People, by being free, are now uncertain of what they are going to do. So that's very overwhelming for a lot of people because even you, even if it's just anecdotal, you'll say that if you don't know what you are supposed to do, you will feel uncomfortable. The fact that we don't know what will happen tomorrow, the next day, and so on and so forth. Um, we're better off with certain things, even if they are not that beneficial to us or not that advantageous to us compared um, to having things uncertain. Even in the natural sciences, uh, you have this um, cognitive bias where people prefer certain things than uh, things that entail probability. Kaya nga, for example, you're offered a one-time subscription that costs a lot more versus a monthly subscription that might change. And the person will tell you, sasabihin lang nila, dito ka na sa sigurado kaysa yung magmamonthly, mag-iiba-iba pa kaya. Mas prefer mo yung one-time subscription. Even if, let's say, the app became bad in the long run. O kaya, a more or a closer example will be say if you have a partner that offers stability versus another potential partner that has or that is quite uncertain, you in the long run, if you are thinking rational, quote unquote, you'll pick the one that is stable
Kaya nga ang sinasabi
precisely
nila,
because
pag-ibig,
it's
hindi
stable.
siya rational.
So pero it's not really pag ayun nga, pag when you try to think about it deeply, hindi naman talaga stability does not equate to happiness. You have a lot of stable things. Even the status quo itself in itself can be said to be stable. It fights for stability, but it's not necessarily the best thing that we have. In fact, we dream every day of having something different, but it's just stable, so we stick to it as people have had. Uh, Now, going back to the context of fairies, are fundamentally human beings. They thought were free. We have that option of changing things every day, even our values. So we have no uh, fundamental or ultimate reasons as to why we have to be like this, but we choose to because we think that we don't have any choice. Yeah, but when we embrace that choice, you have on the other end uncertainty, and uncertainty is not so. It's not such a again a good thing for a lot of people. But suppose that you want to change that, or if you ask, sorry, or a better question would be, who would change that? It's most likely the people that are not comfortable with the status quo, who are oppressed by the system, who are not uh, comfortable with the way things are.
I'd like
So
to
that's why I
I
think,
sorry.
yeah.
Go lang.
Sige, 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 sige.
Hindi, I would like to just say in line what you were saying. Because it might sound scary, diba? So I agree with Marco. No? We like systems. We like things that are sigurado, right? And it comes with the territory of us being colonial creatures or post-colonial creatures. Diba? Um, but I would also like to offer a glimmer of hope. And I think hope is a very underestimated concept and feeling in this world of despair that we are currently in with the pandemic and all. That, there are pockets of resistance that are getting deeper and deeper and are getting bigger and bigger. And that these pockets of resistance don't necessarily offer anarchy, right? Because sometimes when we talk about resistance and we talk about rebellion, it's always in an anarchist perspective. And it's always in a your rebellion is wrong perspective. And it comes with the territory in us being, again, post-colonial beings. But also, let's look at examples of resistance which are bloodless, which are helpful, and which are hopeful. For example, these days, yung community pantry, right? The community pantries that have been popping up, and the stories that are coming in that say, people are, street sweepers who don't have food, only get an orange or two oranges. Freedom, if a privileged person would say, an argument against freedom would say, what if they take the whole thing when no one's looking? But as we've seen, it hasn't come out yet. Like, it hasn't happened yet, right? And it might be so that people take advantage of the system. But does that mean that we stop, right? If a one person takes advantage of it, does that mean we stop the whole thing? We stop helping other people because we are taken advantage of? Does that
Here,
mean we stop
here.
believing, right, other people because one person lied? And that might mean we are vulnerable, but that also means we are human, right? And which do you prefer is the next question, because we can never tell you what to do, diba? And I don't even know what to do sometimes.
It all boils down to being comfortable with that uncertainty and believing and with only what you believe in as your sort of how do you put this? Hindi nga, it's not supposed to be what you believe in that you rely on or you go back to when things are astray. Rather, it's your humanity. It's ambiguous, but it should be. So much so that we have to accept the changing dynamics that comes with the human being as an individual and the complicated dynamics that comes with being with other people. as an individual.
Thank you, Marco. Pero again, I would like to point out that I am talking from a position of privilege, right? I may be a woman, right? But woman who has privilege, who was raised in the notion that I have power and my own power, and I have education backing me up also, right? And I'm only saying all these things because I know them, and knowledge is also privilege. So we're going back into, parang I just don't want people to listen to this and go, you're only saying that because you're a teacher, or you're only saying that because mayaman ka. Hindi mo alam yung feeling ng oppressed. Pero kasi we're all oppressed in some way or another. We're not part of the elite, right? But again, it's not saying that we don't have privilege. And the fact that I can tell you this without fear of being dead, right, or without fear for my life, it tells you that I do have privilege, and we shouldn't discount that in the conversation, because that is very important and unfair to those who don't.
Acknowledge, ma'am. Actually, we were also thinking the same thing, because the fact that we have a platform to be able to speak and talk about this in itself is privilege. The students of FEU in general, diba, we're going after education. We have that opportunity. Some people don't, unfortunately, diba? So it is privileged. So then this brings us to sort of transition over to when Freire says that the radical requirement of transformations is objective reality with some sort of subjectivity. And initially, this was occurred to us in a very confusing way, because how can an objective reality be created? It's on page 49 to 50. Yes, but and it's like it's confusing to us, because how can something objective? How can we create a system with that is just for all? Root from something that is subjective. So basically, I kind of want to spark that discussion, why that matters and how that occurs in the time that we have.
Marco, gusto mo yan. Pero may sagot ako. Pero take turns tayo.
Sige. But as far as the question of objective reality with subjective reality in Freire's context, what he's really pertaining to is the value, it's the nature of the world and its relationship with human beings. So much so that if you only have the world without human beings, you have a valueless world. It's a world without values. Things like that are so close to our values, such as human institutions, human evaluations, from money to governments, they're not going to be there when there are no human beings. At the very at best, they will be buildings. Not even buildings. They will just be forms in the world that exists. We don't. Animals won't conceive of them as an edifice that represents freedom, that represents justice. Rather, they're just rocks put together or stones put together. These institutions won't be even there in the first place without human beings. But then you have here human beings again, in the context of Freire that he puts into context with ideas such as existentialism and Marxism. You have human beings who create their values and express it through praxis. They put their values into the world by making them quote unquote real. They put up institutions that are founded on not just whims, but rather on ideas that human beings put into the world. Think of it this way: human beings are your are middlemen that makes a very raw commodity into a product. That's quite capitalistic of me to use the analogy, but in essence, that's the role of human beings in the context of they try to put it in a more Marxist sense, so much so that they identify people as free. But to put it in contemporary terms, sadly, that is flawed and laden with capitalistic analogies, uh, you have there that role of human beings creating their own values and putting it out there in the world. So if we want to understand the world with human beings, you have to embrace that it comes with, or what comes with this objective world are subjective beings. And these subjective beings are, in a way, objective, so much so that they are there as well. Ayun. Am I making sense?
Yes, sir.
Slightly.
So
Joke
much
lang.
sense.
Hindi, you do. And I was gonna add to that in saying that, you know, in literary perspective, in a more literary perspective, stories matter. And the reason why they matter is because give voice to the voiceless and provide voices and perceptions and perspectives that us as people just won't be able to produce on our own, because we exist, there's only one of us, and we all exist in different contexts, right? And Freire says, to deny the importance of subjectivity in the process of transforming the world and history is naive and simplistic. It is to admit the impossible, a world without people. This objectivistic position is as ingenious as that of subjectivism, which postulates people without a world. World and human beings do not exist apart from each other, they exist in constant interaction. And this is what Marco's been saying, right? We exist with each other, but we don't necessarily know what each other are going through. And I argue, and I would like to interpolate, and I would like to argue that this is the role of literature and the arts, is to show people that this is what we are going through, and this is what, other people are going through that you might not be aware of, and we would like you to listen. Because in listening, there is a conversation that will take place, and this conversation would lead us to maybe change this, not maybe, but change the system bit by bit, right? And this is why I was so adamant with Marco with commenting on yung students sa a discussion, because the students do have a lot of legitimate and genuine concerns. For example, why isn't Turnitin available for them to use on their own before giving to their professors? And because the students said this, we made a way for that to be possible, right? And I think it's just the acknowledgement that we are all different, but it doesn't mean that we cannot listen to each other, because all our viewpoints, some may be wrong, some may be right, but the question becomes, why are they wrong and why are they right? And maybe we can strive for a world where we are not suffering.